Okay, we're back with another Jake Munro video. And it's been a while, but I want to check this video out. Men are being attacked. So, yeah, uh, uh, you really do like Jake's take on a lot of stuff. Uh, Very entertaining. So, I'm curious to know what you guys think. Leave a comment below. Definitely follow Jake Munro's channel. I'd like to give credit to the original content creator. Uh, uh, Make sure that respect is given and that acknowledgement is given. But follow me on my YouTube and Twitch, Talkative Carl, as I stream games, react to videos, and review content. And without further ado, let's check out the Jake Munro Show.
Men are under attack in this country, and at this point, it is absolutely undeniable. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jake Munro. This is the Jake Munro Show. And today I'm going to be talking about the fact that the UK, Britain, is attacking white men. Because, of course, they are. You watched my last video. You watched the alt-right pipeline. You watched me debunk it. You instead watched me define how the alt-left pipeline is far more likely to be for nefarious means. How that should be attacked, dismantled entirely. But I'm going to be talking specifically about the formerly Great Britain, now just that place where Starmer is, hopefully for not much longer. Resign, asshole. Read the room. So, how are men under attack in the UK specifically? I've explained how men are under attack throughout all of Western culture, Western civilization. They are. It's undeniable. At this point, it is observable, but now we all know that the left they've gone mask off, haven't they? They're no longer interested in hiding their vindictive, nefarious ways. They don't care anymore. They're no longer pretending to be the good guys, they're not even trying. But as long as we remain the bad guys, they can do whatever they want. That's why they're acting that way. Anyway, specifically, how are men being attacked in Britain? Well, to do that, to answer that question, we're going to have to go back. We're going to have to go back a little bit. We're going to have to look into exactly where this is starting. It is starting in adolescence.
Whoa.
I thought he was going to say
that?
like America.
I just built a budgeting app in Base
yeah,
44.
Guys,
it starts when they're young.
You may have not seen this, Americans. You might be aware of it because it was a bit of a cultural phenomenon over here. Because the UK wanted something like this so hard. They wanted that, man. They were bricked up. God, they were looking for something like this. There was a show created called Adolescence. It portrayed a white boy doing his best to maintain the most villainous expression on his face. Doing his best, at the director's advice, to try and portray white young boys as evil as possible. Can you give us an evil face, Timmy? I don't know what his name was. Can you give us an evil look, an expression? More evil. No, more evil. You know what? Can someone take this kid and give him like evil expression training? I want this white boy to really sell that he's evil, that he's bad. Now this was made by a dude, this guy. Can't be bothered to look up his name. He was inspired to write this show about a white boy stabbing a girl because he was inspired to do so by things like red pill, like online red pill content creators. I'm assuming. I've not watched this shit, okay? I have better things to do with my life than waste my time watching this garbage. However, I do know where it came from, what inspired it, and what it's going to do now that it's been created. But what inspired this idiot to make this was he saw on the news that knife crime, you probably already know where I'm going with this, knife crime is way up. And women are being stabbed by young boys. Yeah. No, they're not white. Before you ask. No. Per thousand, actually, you're far more likely to be stabbed by a black dude. A young black man, actually. In fact, before you ask. No. Per thousand, actually, you're far more likely to be stabbed by...
Okay. Arrest rate for every 1,000 people by ethnicity, and sex. All female and male. So, black, mixed, white, other.
By a black dude. A young black man, actually.
Figure 9. Male suspects convicted of homicide show a younger age profile than female suspects. Percentage of convicted suspects, England and Wales, 3 years combined. Year ending March 2022 to March 2024. Male convicted suspects, female convicted suspects, percentage of convicted suspects. So there's your wow. So in the age 35 to 44 is like the female is higher. Wow. When you get past 35, it's like the females get very stabby. It's kind of weird. But it's like, it's the teens is where like the boys are highest.
In fact, they're more likely to stab each other and then stab white dudes and then stab white women. They're quite low down. So these statistics don't lend themselves very well to the creation of this show, but the creator of this show saw that women were being stabbed or that a woman had been stabbed. I will tell you exactly the news report that he'd seen. And decided like, why? Why is this happening, he says. Can you believe this? He was like, why is this happening? And then he decided to make a show about it where it's a white boy that did it, which is statistically very unlikely compared to other statistics and other ethnicities far more likely to do it based on per thousand. And not only that, decided to shoehorn in the red pill online social media sort of, the toxic environment that young boys tend to apparently cultivate whenever they chat online. Misogyny. Yes, misogyny. And decided to make a show about these two things, one being the cause of the other, two things together. And in typical Netflix fashion, they decided to race swap the kid. Race swap from what, Jake? I'm glad you fucking asked that question. Because one of the most egregious crimes, one of the most despicable things to happen here in the UK, one of the most telling events that happened.
I'm really am surprised, it falls so heavily into like a young black male, demographic, mixed race second in the UK, because like I'm not familiar with UK's issues outside of probably maybe like some glaring stuff, but I knew like England had this whole thing with knife incidents. I think that was like very prevalent there. I think maybe also, well, not as heavily as Japan, because only reason I bring up Japan because I know guns are, very much outlawed for everybody outside of certain parameters, like you being a police officer. So a lot of like violent stuff is usually attributed to bladed weapons, but England in particular is very high in terms of knife incidents. So I do know that much, but I didn't know what demographic it entailed. So that's
happened in the UK, telling of the kind of environment and the kind of climate we have here in the UK now in regards to the kinds of people that comprise the population. It was this guy.
Yep.
Now, this criminal, and his three victims here.
Oh God.
They were never explicitly said as being the reason why he made this, but that this went huge.
I hate to like judge a book by its cover, but yeah, he does look like It doesn't help with the mug shot, but he looks like a guy that would, yeah, he gets off on stabbing people. Yeah, this dude looked like a psycho.
This was a big deal. Then Adolescence came out.
And it's not racist to point it out.
Specifically because the guy that made it was inspired by girls being stabbed by boys, which is a deliberately obtuse and dense approach to what the real problem is. Now, I could stand here and go through yet more statistics like these.
The one who dies with the most toys wins.
Look at explaining how white men are not the problem here, but this is not about that. Okay, I could. Hell, I might. Since Prevent do not operate here in Northern Ireland, I could do that if I wish, and I might just do that. However, it's not about that today. It's not about that today. We're going to be talking about how men are under attack with a little bit of racism. Or just noticing facts, which tend to be the same thing these days. Racism, noticing facts, reading statistics, these things tend to all be the same these days. So, Adolescence was released, and in typical Netflix fashion, the race swapping happened from this dude to this kid, because of course. And how else was Netflix going to pick this up? How else? Wasn't going to be any other way. Wasn't going to be accurate, was it? So of course this had to happen in order for his show to be picked up. And then the UK government, they loved it. They loved it, they loved it, they loved it so much. They couldn't get enough. We have a Netflix show that conveys perfectly the kind of thing that we're trying to get across here in the UK government. The exact kind of narrative we're trying to spin. Excuse me, idiot director of this show. Could we use this? Could we use this in our schools? Could we show it to young boys, please? Now you might be thinking, optimistically, no, this is a terrible thing to show young boys in school. Giving them a persecution complex immediately? Influencing young boys into thinking that society hates them because they're at any point going to randomly stab a bunch of young girls for no reason? Optimistically, you might be thinking, the answer is no, we're not going to do that. Why would we do that? They did that, and now they are showing Adolescence across the nation to young boys to try and scare the fuck out of them to not, stab girls, little girls. And you've got white boys in these classes too, just being like, why the fuck am I here? Well, because I...
See, well, A is indoctrination, and B, this is why it's so tough. Like, girls nowadays keep asking, where are all the good men at? Like, where are all the strong men, the real men? Well, first of all, you shouldn't let things like Netflix parent your kids. You should have the proper mental capacity and the responsibility on you as a parent to teach your young boy the rights and wrongs, so when he goes out into the world, he has some moral foundation. Same thing with a young girl. Teach them proper respect towards young boys, so when she grows up, she will have a positive outlook towards men in general. And look out what, separate them from the bad boys, and not to get anywhere near the bad boys. But you should not be putting, because Netflix don't care about your kids, they care about profits. So wherever it's gonna sell, they'll the whole any LGBTQ stuff, they're dumping a lot on that platform, but it'll push this kind of thing. And because young impressionable kids soak things up like a sponge, you're going to have young boys grown up to be beta bitches, which is in turn not going to be good for society, especially when it comes to interactions with the opposite sex, where you know full well that those young women are attracted to strong masculine men, which is not going to be attributed to the beta bitches, because they're going to do everything they can to kiss the feet and the ass of all women without holding them accountable for anything, because they want to pedestalize them. But that's not going to serve them in the long run, because those girls don't appreciate guys. They'll just allow them to run all over them. So only thing left to fill that need the girls want in terms of a masculine man is only going to be those top 10 or 20% of dudes who put them in a place, tell them no, and handle business, and not going to coddle them or worry about their feelings 24/7, and they in their own minds find that very appealing. But that's going to be, bad for those young women, because those guys tend to not take, them seriously, which therefore put them in a particular predicament where now they're jaded, because those particular guys who have the attributes they're looking for but don't have the characteristics to back them up. So this leaves them with either the beta bitches or the monsters. I don't want to say monster, but it's guys that just is very nonchalant about, being in any kind of relationship whatsoever. Like the guys who can't commit and the guys that don't really want. And you leave them with nothing to choose from. And it does not help when you got Netflix pushing this show, Adolescence, giving this bad perspective about guys at a very young age. What do you think they're going to take from it? Which, is it going to be something positive? No, it's going to be something very perverted, like, to put it mildly, of a perverted take on how boys deal with situations that only boys can deal with, because we have to face reality in a particular way that girls do not get to experience. Guys understand, very early how reality truly works. We don't get the benefit of being delusional or dumb or whatever and have somebody come rescue us, but by the time we're 35 and taking care of us for the rest of our life. We don't have that luxury. We have to work within the real world and understand the pecking order and what we contribute to overall society. But we need healthy, masculine men who will not coddle the guys, but also put in a perspective this is what is expected of you. This is how you treat women, but you do not allow her to run all over you. You are expected to be the leader. You gotta, show up, with some confidence, be financially well off, be ambitious, take care of yourself physically and mentally, and show up in the world respectable with good values. But you're not going to kiss the girl's ass. You'll be respectful of the opposite sex, just like you would with the same sex. But you will not sit there and just, pedestalize a woman, especially if she does not deserve it. She doesn't get it off rip just because she's just a female. She gets that after she makes sure she respects you as a man, because the men are the ultimate deciders of who gets in a relationship. If she ultimately wants a relationship, she has to be the one to come correct if she likes you. That has to be taught to young men, so that way they can move like men, but not like monsters. Not like monsters or betas. In terms of just guys that, have some self-respect about themselves.
Because the demographic that are actually stabbing people, and in high enough amounts for you to make a show about it, are also male. You think this is a male problem? It's all men? It's an all male problem? This has just popped up out of nowhere. Yeah, the huge influx of immigration and non-whites invading England exponentially over the last couple of decades. You don't think that has anything to do with this increase in violent crime with knives? It's just suddenly coming out of nowhere and Andrew Tate's responsible for it? This is how they think. This is what they're thinking. And this is also...
Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of stuff that Andrew Tate said or does, but he's only the response, like him or Kevin Samuels or a lot of these male podcasts or Red Pill content. It's just like it's only a response to how far feminism has pushed, too far in one direction, to the point, because it's not even about like feminism anymore. Feminism started out on the women's advocacy, like being allowed to vote and have their own credit card and this kind of thing without any kind of male authority figure to co-sign off of it. That should have been that. That's what they initially was trying to fight for. But then it's got more and more and more. And then it's, you get like women who want to be allowed to choose what partner they want to have, like as much sex as they want to, as men get to. It just evolved into just I want, without any type of consequences or understanding of what comes with it. Is all this glitz and glamour of these perks, what you think you might get out of it, and it's just like it's until like they reach into like mid to late 40s when they realize, because very recently a lot of women realizing feminism is a complete scam, and they're not living the kind of lives they kind of wanted to live, because they end up being taught the opposite of what they should have been moving. I say it to say, like, they've been taught to climb that corporate ladder and a guy will be there later. But no, what they should have been taught is the flip effect. Get yourself a good guy early. Have a family, because ultimately that's what women want, for the most part. Most women want a family and a bunch of kids and stuff like that. They can be able to, mother and nurture and all this other stuff. Do that early, out the way. So by the time, because your womb has an expiration date, a career does not. You can always get a career at any point in your life. By the time you're like 35 plus, you already had like 3 kids by this point. A lot of them are pretty self-sufficient, like about to leave college by that point, all that stuff. You can then start worrying about, okay, my kids are pretty much like self-sufficient. They don't really need mommy like that anymore. And now I can start that, cooking business, or I want to like study the bar to be a lawyer. You can then worry about that kind of stuff because you got like the important stuff out the way. Now you can focus on you. That is something you probably should have been teaching young girls, so that way they won't have a what do you call it, like regret, in a sense.
So what white men are thinking, this is what young white boys are thinking. This is how they think. This is what they're thinking. And this is also what white men are thinking. This is what young white boys are thinking. Miss, can I go? Violent crime with knives? It's just suddenly coming out of nowhere and Andrew Tate's responsible for it?
Oh, right. Yeah, there's another thing. Yeah, it's only a response to, like, because women kept pushing. Guys, it's like, okay, now you're just being spoiled brats. and entitled brats. And you get all these other podcasts and men's movements trying to express that, okay, in your path in trying to lift women up and all this other stuff, you let certain bad faith individuals in your little groups who are jaded by their past relationship, or like their father didn't do them right or something like that. They got chips on their shoulder. They infiltrated, and because women care about each other's feelings, they didn't want to like call them out or anything like that. Even though you know that these chicks are just like not right in the head or not healed, you let them in. They corrupt the movement. Now you gotta let them in these certain spaces to be the loudest voices. So now they got young impressionable girls listen to those kind of women, and therefore now you got a whole ecosystem of girls for a good long time expressing some legitimate but some not legitimate grievances about men in general, when it's probably hyper specific dudes that probably done them wrong, but they kind of blew it up like it's like the whole broad stroke of dudes. So now you get this or at least they have this kind of perception of guys, a negative perception of guys. So now it's like, okay, I can at least finesse this guy, at least get something out of it. If I'm going to be in this terrible relationship, let me get something out of him. Oh, now it's just filled with distrust, and no one wants to work with each other no more from the ground up. It's like they got a bunch of girls, doing all this, 304ing during their youth. Then or they girl bossing most of their life, getting entitled, thinking they're a 10 all the time. So when a decent dude comes around them, we don't know what we're walking into, and they're only mad at these red pill podcasts. Let's be real. It doesn't matter if it's Andrew Tate or Kevin Samuels or Fresh and Fed or the whatever podcast or Whole Math. It does not matter which one of them is. They ultimately are trying to educate young naive guys so they don't get finessed like so many others prior to them by girls who try to pull a fast one. And there's a lot of those girls out there that acts like this, or they get encouraged by girls like this because they think it's cool and they want to be the girl's girl kind of thing. Shout out to the women that isn't falling in that trap, who actually have some sense and are not like girls, because y'all know girls tend to backstab one another. They tend to be very two-faced to one another. And some girls are catching up or wise to the situation. They saying with their chest, like, yeah, some of these girls are kind of whack, and they'll try to sabotage you because when they're around each other and they trying to and a decent dude try to walk up to talk with one of y'all girls, is always those jaded ones that are trying to block your blessing, trying to keep you single. Because guys, when we're out with each other and one of us is trying to holler at one of the chicks with with a group of girls, the other dudes will try to run interference, so the guy will have a few minutes time to holler at the girl without any cock blocking going on. Those are genuine friendships, because girls, they have friends, but it's so probably one or two solid girlfriends that will actually hold them accountable. They actually encourage marriage and all this stuff, and not single behavior. It's just like guys tend to have better friendship groups. We end up having to I would say these little men's spaces are trying to inform these young dudes, and they're only mad at these like Kevin Samuels or Andrew Tate's, mostly, and all these other stuff. They're trying to, or Rachel Wilson or Andrew Wilson. They just mad at them mostly because they are trying to fix the nuclear family, or trying to, at the very least, keep guys informed. Like Jebediah Bila is another good content creator. She ultimately wants to arm young, impressionable guys with knowledge, so when they're out in these little social circles, they are looking out for particular women to actually be in a relationship with. They can parse between signals or signifiers of proper women and push aside the women that are ultimately going to be useless in any form of a relationship. And they don't like it because they don't like, Jebediah Bila or Fresh and Fit or Andrew or Rachel Wilson. They don't like any of them, mostly because they are pretty much taking away those bad girls' playbook, the finessing playbook. They don't like it. You're revealing the dark side of feminism, of femininity. They don't like it because it's all about image. If you strip away the mask of this perfect little angel, it enrages them. It's kind of weird that, oh my God, like, I can't run game on this dude because now he is watching me twice as hard, not because of my pretty little makeup, because they count on naive dudes to shell out a bunch of money for a first date to try to impress her. And what all those, like Jebediah Bila, Andrew and Rachel Wilson, all whatever podcast, Brian from whatever podcast, and Whole Mouth, they all trying to make sure, like, hey, dude, watch out for these type of behaviors. If she's just, isn't cool with a simple coffee date, if she got, smacking her lips, shaking her head and giving so much attitude over it, tell her to kick rocks. Have some self-respect. They hate that because that's a mark that's lost on them. They want easy marks so they can finesse guys out of their resources without giving anything in return. Not no sex, not no girlfriend energy or even wifely energy. They don't have to do any of that stuff because they count on guys' naivete or their thirst for sex or even companionship to, gain anything, out of this dude and leave him high and dry without a second thought. But that guy, if armed properly, he will not fall for that from jump, saving himself a lot of heartache, saving himself a lot of money, saving himself some respect. That's what a lot of these female content creators hate deep down. They hate it when that you're taking away their advantage. It's all about power and manipulation and trying to gain as much without giving it any in return. That's infuriating to them. And that's why I like young guys to make sure they are armed properly with knowledge so they can make the proper choices moving forward and hopefully teaching their own future kids so there's no perpetual cycle of, there's always going to be girls that might pull a fast one here and there, but at least it won't be as rampant.
This is how they think. This is what they're thinking. And this is also what white men are thinking. This is what young white boys are thinking. Miss, can I go? I shouldn't be here. I have no intention of stabbing people. In fact, statistically speaking, I'm nowhere near as likely to stab people or women. Not as much as Ruta Cabana. Can I go? It's like, no. No, because to acknowledge the fact that statistically speaking you're less likely to do a violent crime would be racist, so we have to lump you all in here even though you're nowhere near as likely to do that. And this is unfair. We're painting you all with the same brush, but you're all in here. White British men being attacked because of the actions of invaders. Because you're both men, must be the same. How dense. I want you to imagine, I want you to think, what kind of complex would this give a kid, right? Young girls are just like, you're doing great, sweetie, you're so amazing, you can be literally anything and everything you want to be, and you'll probably be better than a boy at doing this thing. You're amazing, you're great, I'm going to pick you first, you're going to have this position above these boys, and you're going to do fantastic. That's all women here. That's all women here these days. You don't have to give birth to kids, you don't have to uphold your side of the bargain, your responsibilities to society. Men do. You, however, sweetie, don't need to do anything that society requires you to do in order for society to continue. You can go ahead and do whatever the you want in any capacity that you like.
Yeah, and that's why like the nuclear family is so messed up right now. Where people, young kids don't, I won't say young kids, but young adults are so like jaded about the future. It's like, or they don't want to have kids. There are no options or anything like that. It's just they're thinking like, oh, like I said, they want to climb the corporate ladder. They want to girl boss most of their youth. They want to have their little fun for most of their youth, not realizing or being taught at an early age that you are at, these young girls are at the prime of their life between, let's say, between 17 and like 30. If you want to really stretch it out, that is your prime years, because those are your fertile years. And ultimately, and it's not saying that girls can't do certain things. Like, sure, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, you want to be like a Michelin star chef. You want to do all these, that's great. Not saying you can't do it, but you gotta understand the priorities. You can't have everything at once. There's gonna be trade-offs in life. There's gonna be sacrifices that you have to make, and you gotta be okay to live with them. But we're trying to let you know that in terms of a relationship standard, what you choose to do with your life doesn't really mean anything to a guy. Not to say he'll hate you because you got a job. He just won't care, because most of that relationship, he's going to put in most of the funds. That's at least generally speaking. And he's often going to be okay with that. Guys don't care about like a girl's degrees or job, because ultimately that's not going to benefit the guy, because we're not impressed by that stuff. We want a young girl, or say young woman, mind you, this young woman who is gonna be, good looking, fit, nice, pleasant, isn't jaded by past relationships, has a good relationship with men in her family, and is not a headache and want to actually build with the guy. That's what we ultimately are seeking as men, the kind of future wife that is sexually exclusive to us and can bear our children. That is ultimately our like, at least things that guys ultimately like from the opposite sex, but also it's the only thing that kind of matters in terms of the grand scheme of humanity, to be able to reproduce. What you give to the world in terms of ladies is being able to bear children and nurture the next generation. That is like the ultimate thing that is expected to from a woman. In terms of guys, our ultimate thing that we need to be able to do is go out there and grind to build, produce something in the world that is respectable, be able to protect, to be the shield of the most important thing is like the children and the family. And then you're also the wife, obviously. But it's just that is like the main thing that is expected from men. Be able to get out there, work hard, build something for yourself, so that way it's respectable by not just your woman, but by society as a whole. Build yourself your own little personal kingdom, so that way you'll be able to cover not only the wife but your children by extension, and hopefully make enough so that way your future generations can reap the benefits of that in some kind of way, or at least give them some kind of boost, so when they have like an easier starting off point than you did. And it kind of pains me to hear some people saying like, I'm cool with not having children. I mean, sure, it's their personal choice, and I respect that. But it is kind of like a slap in your face of your ancestors who went through a lot worse situations in centuries past in order to get to this point where I'm cool with cutting off my bloodline right here. F my ancestors. It is kind of disrespectful if you think. Like they went through maybe some wars, or like survive raids from like Mongols or something, or cattle rustlers, or like survive probably wild animals in order to make sure that they can have a family and continue their bloodline, only to get to the 21st century, down to 2026 their lineage, in order to say, well, I'm good. I'm good. Just cut my bloodline right here of me. That is wild. If you really think about it, that you just actively choosing to end your bloodline, especially towards, if it's women saying that is especially egregious. It's like, you're just like, I don't want to pop out any children that shares my bloodline with the man that I hopefully love and respect, that our bloodline can continue on with this particular kid so they can carry the torch to the next step. You saying F all that, and that is just like, I find that very egregious, honestly. It's their personal choice. They do what they want. I'm not their parent, but it's just like, kind of like, it's kind of whack, honestly.
And you're strong and you're brave and you can do whatever you like, right? That's women. That's girls these days. Girls, that's what girls get, okay? In the media, in schools, everything. That is what women. That's what young women are saying, and it shows with the behavior of young women these days. However, I want you to imagine the other side of the coin, which is young boys now being degraded, constantly being reminded that they are a potential predator, a potential criminal, and they have an innate sense of violence. And at any point, they could snap, and they're going to be on the front news, headlines, that kind of stuff. You've killed a bunch of people. And even if you don't, everyone around you is going to be afraid that you're gonna. Yeah? Women are going to be afraid of you all the time. Everyone in society is going to be afraid of you. You're always going to be seen as a potential criminal, a potential misogynist. Your potential is constantly and always being viewed as you're going to do something offensive or violent at any point, regardless of their intentions. Imagine a young boy being told this. What do you think the behavior is going to be? Now, I've already done a video about the alt-right pipeline. Congratulations, leftists. There's another way that you've just gone ahead and created that by yourselves. Good job. Leftists try so hard to make sure that, young boys don't find their way into the alt-right pipeline. Ironically, then, makes them go into it. I'm just using the alt-right pipeline as the pseudonym, as the misnomer that they've assigned to it, because obviously it's that concept I'm describing. If I called it its actual thing, then people won't realize that I'm referring to this construct that the leftists made called the alt-right pipeline. Of course, what I mean is just men waking the fuck up, getting red-pilled, realizing their self-worth, discovering their masculinity, that kind of stuff. Does it end at adolescence? Being shown in schools, young boys being taught that they are a problem in society and are tolerated, and they have to be aware of their behavior at all times. They're being reminded with this absolute fiction of a show.
You know, speaking of adolescents, in terms of thinking about like schools, I don't know where I heard this from. It's probably from various different people that points out that, you know, schools are probably good for girls, but not for boys to a certain extent. Where schools pretty much telling you like sit down, behave, like, you know, listen up, which is good for girls because they're like kind of acclimated to kind of that kind of stuff because they like to listen to authority figures and like the whole notion of, you know, playing fair and all this other stuff. Little boys like the roughhouse. You shouldn't tell like a young boy to sit down and, you know, be quiet, don't play so rough, you know, like that kind of stuff. You want boys to like roughhouse a little bit, get that energy out, you know, get them into sports, you know, scrape their knee a little bit every once in a while. It builds character and it builds self-confidence, you know, all the things that young boys need early, so when they're dealing with life struggles, they can properly move about, so without, you know, it won't hinder them or cripple them in some kind of way, mentally or emotionally, because they're properly prepared. That's why guys tend to be, you know, great. It was important to have both the man and a woman in a child's life, but it's especially important for a man to be there, because that way either young boy is properly set up to be a proper man, and a young girl's, you know, have the understanding of what a proper man they should be with when they get older, and not F around with bad boys who she's trying to seek validation from because she lacked it in her own personal family or something like that. The same old tired excuse. Like, I didn't have a father in my life. It's like, these were uncles, these are brothers, these are male cousins, these are grandfathers. You know, like, did you have, like, you know, coaches, you know, in school, or a teacher, like, you know, that, you know, was like respectable? You know, didn't have like a pastor that was like, you know, really good to the church and this community. Like, you had somebody. That's why it kind of annoys when they make that lame ass excuse about lack of a father. You have like I didn't have no proper masculinity to be the examples of. Bull crap. Yes, you did. Men didn't just show up all of a sudden when you're 25. They were always there. You just didn't actively look for it because you want to be a perpetual victim. And the girls around you kept, you know, coddling your little feelings because they, you know, like they want to be in a hand-holding circle, and they didn't want to, probably a few of them want to call you out on it, but they didn't want to say nothing because they, you know, either they didn't want to make it their problem, or they just didn't want to lose their little social group. But there are girls out there who will tell you point blank to your face, girl, you have an uncle right there. Why don't you just go talk with him? Your brother's right there. Why don't you, you know, use that as an example and ask him for help, some guidance? Because women want guidance, male leadership. They need structure, which comes from men. That's what a lot of guys provide in society, which is not really respected. Guys are not really respected nowadays, even though we provide not only the whole infrastructure thing, which a lot of people bring up a lot of time, that guys go out there in the grind, in the doing the dirty jobs, the dangerous jobs, the life-threatening jobs, things that needs to get done. But we also provide structure, whether physically or emotionally. We provide structure and guidance. You know, the stern hand. I ain't talking about like assault. I'm talking about just like, hey, this laying down the law. The male leadership is the first line of defense, which girls want and need ultimately, but it's always deemed as a bad thing. Oh, you're controlling. or these little buzzwords they want to throw out to shame men and young boys. They want to start early, bring it back to the video. They want to start early, so by the time he grow up, he doesn't have any wherewithal or some understanding of how to move about in society. That's why they flock to somebody like Andrew Tate, because you pretty much like browbeat them from like either take the father out of the home or not making sure that, okay, even if the father was a piece of crap, you as a woman take it upon yourself to make sure this child has a proper male leader here that will benefit them, because you cannot do it. No matter how hard you try, you need like a proper male leader in the household, so at least around most of the time, so that way this kid can have some kind of structure and guidance, so that way they can benefit from it. But you stripping that away, it's not going to be good for them in the long run, because then they'll have no examples to live off of. So it goes at a detriment. Then you put them out in society that the public has to deal with that. If it's a boy with no male leadership, he's either like a mama's boy that or like some kind of like ignoramus, a coward, or just some kind of monster who doesn't know how to curve his like testosterone, or like, yeah, sure, he knows how to protect, but if it or he shows some pillar of strength, but taking it too far, doesn't have like the proper guardrails to curve all that stuff, then it's gonna either land him in jail or dead. Or when it comes to a young girl, she's gonna try to seek some kind of validation, or some seek the father in some guy, which is probably not gonna be a proper man. Or she won't have any examples on how to treat that man if she comes around a good guy, because the mom didn't take it upon herself to make sure that she has some kind of like good co-parenting skills, or at the very least make sure she has like a good man in her life, so that way she can show what a proper wife does to a man, so that way she can just mimic that when she meets a proper man. When she grows up, she'll have an example, so there won't be any excuse and less chances of any kind of trauma she'll end up experiencing. It all goes back to the nuclear family. That's why it's important.
So that they are dangerous. Does it end with adolescence? No. No, it does not. Schools are now being infiltrated by something called misogyny classes. Yeah. Misogyny classes. Exclusively for young boys, again. Misogyny classes are being taught to young boys in order to make them aware of their innate, intrinsic nature to want to be nasty and misogynistic and violent and abusive to women. So you've got adolescence, and now you've got misogyny classes now. British men are about to be the most rebellious anti-feminists we've ever seen, and we have leftists to thank for it. Don't we?
He's right. They end up creating the exact monsters they are afraid of, but they won't learn from it or take any kind of responsibility. What they'll end up doing is like saying like, oh, see what happens? They just had internalized misogyny. It was always there, see? Instead of like, you acknowledging that you probably created this. It was very nonchalant or, really indifferent. But you end up kind of pushing and hammering. And making them seem like every little thing that they do or live by, or just, things that are just part of their biology, is all of it's evil. If it's not female centered, if it's not coming from the feminine in any kind of way, then it's just deemed evil and needs to be eradicated. And that's why you got, and then through the same breath, you dare to ask the question, where are the real men at? Guys nowadays don't know how to change a tire. Well, you kind of like. Do you think maybe you probably browbeat them to death, making it seem like everything they naturally are drawn to is deemed bad? Gee, like, do you think those two things correlate? It's like, oh, I want to learn how to change the tire, but like, I don't want to take away her independence, so I gotta let her, do everything on her own.
They are trying so hard, too hard.
Girls don't know what they want, honestly. They say one thing and they, end up doing another. They do not know what they want. That's why you need male leadership. That's why it's not good to have like some kind of matriarchy, because girls don't know what they want. They change, according to whatever mood they're in. And one way one day, and then 5 seconds later, before the sun goes down, it's completely shifted to another direction. It's never stagnant. It's never like steady, even keeled.
Push men down, put them in a box, so that all these commies and women can go ahead and destroy everything. Because again, like I said in my last video, the only thing that stands between these commies and these narcissistic women and destroying everything we know and love, the only thing that stands between them and that are...
Yeah, honestly, think about it. Think about if a girl having so far as like a decent day, but like some barista at her local coffee shop mess up her order, and she's a little miff, and that pretty much ruin most, if not all, her day, and she'll fixate on that. While a guy might experience the same thing. It's annoying, but he's pretty much generally going to have like a decent day. He's not ruled by his emotions like that. That's what most people are saying, like things like girls shouldn't be in certain like fields or leadership roles. Most of them, roles, because that can be a bad thing in a way, because most girls have not been taught the same way as guys have in terms of managing your emotions. I'm not saying you shouldn't have one, but you gotta be able to manage them. There are things that's gonna irk you, but you shouldn't go off the deep end because of it. Things are gonna make you sad. Doesn't mean you need to blame the whole world or tear everything down, around you because of that mood. You gotta know to be able to emotionally regulate yourself and not try to leave it up to a government entity or your partner to do that for you. They can help, but ultimately it comes down to the individual.
white men, which is why they're being attacked so horrendously. And they can't just go ahead and make these classes just for black boys because that's racist. That would be racist if we did that. Even though it's actually addressing the problem, that would be racist. We are about to go through one of the greatest Renaissance periods in human history where the word racism is going to be used in a comedic tone. Much like I just used it, racism is going to be one of those things that is reappropriated for comedy. Racism is, every time you hear someone use the word racism unironically, the whole room will erupt in laughter, but you will then very quickly get your ass kicked. We're about to reject the concept of racism so hard, they don't even know it yet. You can't push white European men around this hard and not expect this to bite you in the ass harder than you've ever been bitten in your life. So you've got white men now, white kids, children, white boys, young boys, being instilled with a persecution complex, with a victim complex, with this complex of self-hatred. They're going.
Yeah, I really don't care for that either. Because, let's be honest, because it was like at least a good few years when I kind of feel that I think it started around when the live action Little Mermaid remake came about, and that's when I kind of took notice. It's like, why is it they are trying to take over certain things that are meant for white people? Why is everything like they do gotta be considered like racist or deep-seated hatred or something like that? It's like, it's kind of wild to me. It's like, unless they actually do something that I can concretely say, yeah, that is definitely racist. Until then, I'm not going to sit there and make these wild assumptions about white people of the modern era, just like giddy of doing something extremely racist to people every chance they get. I can't live like that. You shouldn't live like that. I'm not going to blame the sins of the past of the current era of white people. That is very ignorant to do so. And I'm not going to sit there and put that on them. You shouldn't put that on white people, especially white men, especially young white men, and filling their head with this garbage where they have these beta dudes sitting there practically flogging themselves in front of people of color and apologizing for stuff that they didn't go through. It's like I don't want them to live like that. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live in like a world like that. It's like, meet you where you are. Until you actually show me something that is like definitely disrespectful at a fundamental level, then I know not to engage with you. But I'm not going to blame this individual or these two people for I'm sorry, not going to blame the entire race all because of these one or two people that were actually racist. I'm not going to blame the entirety of white people all because Jim Bob called me the N-word at the grocery store. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to assume Sally's kids are probably going to have like some deep-seated racism towards my nieces and nephews. I'm not going to sit there and like just make that wild assumption. I'm not going to fill black children's heads with garbage saying that, oh, your white classmate might take your stuff because they don't like you because of your color of your skin. I'm not going to sit there and like put that on them. And when you have like these certain shows or certain black people who want to put that in these kids' heads because kids are very impressionable, and fulfilling these 5-year-olds' mindset with adult complexities that they're not ready to hear yet, to form their own opinion, to properly understand it. So when they grow up, they're going to have some kind of, it is reverse racism. They're going to have this kind of racism towards certain white people who just want to go about their lives and, be cordial. But it's like, oh my God, he made this casserole for the office potluck, but he only probably did that because he's probably racist towards me. It's like you don't want that, put on children.
To hate themselves. There's going to be more boys in therapy than there's ever been. But the British government, they were ecstatic, rubbing their hands together and licking their grinning lips. Flushed in the face they were with the arousal at this opportunity that adolescence had provided. So they brought that into schools, kids can watch that now, young boys, and they're making them watch that. Now they've got the misogyny classes now because of abuse, I guess. This is once again another attack. This is another active effort by the UK government to make sure that young boys are steering clear of things like red pill content. People like Andrew Tate.
It's like, honestly, it's an overreaction after the Me Too movement. It's like definitely an overreaction. So now you got these little programs like Black Lives Matter and Me Too is an overreaction to specific, horrible situations. And then therefore now we're overcorrecting now. You got these little classes in like seminars, over little things. You can't remember when people used to, who work together might end up going out. A guy can ask out a, co-worker, but if she turns you down, it's not a big deal. Or, they tend to date, but maybe it doesn't work out or something like that. But now you got HR programs, and now the guy, if she seems like, oh, he might have coerced me because he might, have one higher position level than her. But now it's like, oh, he coerced me, or I felt like I couldn't say no because he wasn't my boss, but he was definitely higher in a position than. It gets muddy because it couldn't just be like, well, it just didn't work out. Or, you turn him down and he'll just move along. It isn't a big deal. But now you get these stupid little classes, stupid little seminars, all these little things where guys can't even like ask a girl out anymore in like a, casual setting or even like a social setting anymore because he does not want to be deemed as a creep. He doesn't want to lose his livelihood over very benign stuff or just some accusations. But you don't want to be the company that isn't listening, or like you don't want to blame the victim or anything like that stuff. So you'll just find it easier just to believe her, go along with what she says, because that is the lesser of two evils. If you even make it any even and try to hear both sides and make a conclusion, but even though you make appearance like you're hearing all sides, but you just gonna lean on the side of caution and just like go with the lady's thing. Maybe not fire the guy, but maybe put him under some like probationary period, just to make sure that we don't be held liable at the very least. Even though he probably made some very benign compliment towards her, but she kind of took it the wrong way, or she felt she got the ick or whatever. And then you put that in, young, children's classrooms too. And it's like, oh, Tim need to like learn about like, not, the respect girls and like, make sure you don't roughhouse with them and blah, blah, blah. Or you don't like stamp out any potential misogyny that might be lurking with little Timmy. And it's like, oh God, it's overdone. And society's all the worse for it.
In Fuentes, all those other lads that are trying to give men a sense of value back again, they're trying so hard to make sure that they demonize these online red pill spaces so that young boys do not fall into it. Any boy with a sense of common sense should be able to read between the lines as to why they're doing this. When the government is really trying to tell you not to do something, you should probably be doing it. Okay? Not in every context, but in this context, where this smarmy is running everything, not for much longer, I hope. Young men are going to be like, wait, why do we have to listen to this shit? Why am I being, I've not done anything. I've not done anything. They're gonna rebel. Of course they are. Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha's coming up after Zoomers. Gen Alpha are coming. They're good. They're the iPad kids. They're the brain rot kids. We had to watch adolescence in school kids. We had misogyny training in school kids. They're going to be those kids. And I think Gen Alpha probably is going to be the most appropriate label for that generation, the most appropriate name for that generation, because they are going to be absolute tyrants. The good kind. I'm talking like Space Marines, Warhammer, that kind of thing. I don't know why I use that reference. But yeah, they're gonna reclaim everything. They're gonna be like, yeah, we were told a little too hard not to live up to our masculine potential. So we decided to do the complete opposite. No, women love this because now they no longer have to be accountable for anything. They can just act despicable, deplorable at all times. And men are terrified to call it out, to say anything about it. So they just get to continue doing what they're doing, exactly how they want to do it. Women get to do whatever they want. Literally everything but what their responsibility is to society. We've been through this before. Men do the shitty jobs. Women raise the kids. How do you think we bounced back so hard from World War II? We survived after World War II. We thrived, we flourished after World War II. We had a baby boom after World War II because of things like traditional values. Do you think this would happen today? Do you think if there was a World War III where a shit ton of men were killed in their millions, and now that more women serve in the military, women too, though I doubt they'd actually follow through with this assertion that they want to fight on the front lines if they're presented with an actual war, I can imagine they would. World War III ends, what remains of men go back to their country, and the birth rate continues to be the same that it is now, which is below maintenance. There's no baby boom, the dwindling numbers of men, and this arrogant remaining population of women still far more interested in pursuing things like pointless careers, working for a boss, going to Zoom meetings and stuff like this. Zoom meetings and more Zoom meetings and more Zoom meetings about who cares? Who cares? Society was completely fine before a shit ton of feminists started going into the workforce and doing Zoom meetings all day. We were fine, okay? In fact, I think we were better, economically speaking. And societally speaking, we were still better. We were better. Everything was better. There was not this screaming vacuum in society for women to shirk, to ignore their responsibilities to society, their responsibilities to Western culture, their responsibilities to their race, and to the workforce, and value things like promotions over, raising a child, teaching them, playing with them, taking them to school, going through homework, which feminists have managed to convince everybody are bad things. Yeah. Going to a job that sucks ass, working for 10 hours a day, coming home exhausted after listening to your shitty, stupid, dumbass boss, having no time for yourself. These are all things that are better than having kids. You see, people they're gonna hear me being like, oh, you think women should just be at home having kids? What do you mean just? What do you mean just? You're just going to work. Being at home raising kids, that's the real heroic work. That's like the real shit. That's the real deal. You think women should be in the kitchen? What do you think's in the kitchen? That's where you feed your hungry children, where you wash their dirty clothes. And in some cases, in some people's kitchens, this is where you sit upon the table and you help your child through their homework, help them achieve things, help them discover their sense of...
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I was a young kid, my it's all to my stepmother, but my father from time to time in the kitchen helped me and my younger brother with our homework. That happened.
Self-worth. All these things happen in the home from the perspective of a mother to a child. It's not just anything. You're not just a housewife. You're not just raising, that's all I'm doing, just raising kids. The fuck do you mean? When the hell did that lose value to women? To Western women, because things like that still have value to the entire planet. We need to reframe this. I mean, red pill dudes out there like myself and various others, they know this. They know the value of raising children. They know that this is the most important thing in the world. They know this is why Western civilizations bounced back after World War I and II, because of traditional values, because the birth rate was above maintenance. We need to change how we think about this. You're not shackled at home raising children, not realizing your real potential. You're influencing the next generation of adults by raising children. In fact, how good that child grows up to be, how successful and well-adjusted this child becomes as an adult, is going to be the greatest achievement of the mother and the father who worked for this to be the result. And it's this kind of greatness, this kind of value of motherhood that has been completely destroyed and replaced with a woman's value as how useful she is to a corporation. Yeah, you're entirely replaceable. Men already knew this. We don't care, we have a responsibility. Men work at, the factory or whatever, cubicle jobs, waste management, power management, construction, bricklaying, surveying, all these really shitty jobs that suck ass that are very difficult. That's our responsibility. And we know that we're replaceable, but that's our burden to bear. Such as responsibility.
Yeah. It's funny how, most guys don't bitch about whatever job that they have or whatever career that they have. They understand that us toiling is started from Adam to now. Our burden and our sacrifice for the betterment of our kids is to toil out into the world to bring home resources to be able to protect our family, feed our family, and to make sure that they're good before we leave this earth. Women's, most women nowadays deem their ultimate duty as like, how often you hear them bitch about, oh my God, I gotta raise these kids or his kids, or it's like, oh my God, I just want to, time to myself. It's always little like whining. I understand it can be stressful, don't get me wrong, but there is still glory in it. That child, depending on how you raise that kid, will ultimately become something great, and is gonna the breadcrumbs gonna lead back to you. It's not something that you can hand wave away or treat like it's like this horrible burden. That is a glorious burden, if I can coin that. It's glorious burden. Yeah, it's a sacrifice. Sure, that means that you can't climb that little corporate ladder or start the little business that you can always end up doing later when that kid's grown up, or at least self-sufficient, where he doesn't always need you every waking part of the day. But by the time like that kid is in your belly to the point when they are maybe 15, those years, yeah, mommy has to be there, and of course dad too, but but it's definitely like you gotta keep a watchful eye. You don't want any other influence beyond you and the father to influence this kid in any way you do not seem appropriate. Because I don't care, unless it's not like life-threatening or it's something completely horrific. You're ultimately are the ones that get to decide how to raise that kid, and whatever your rules are in the house, those are the rules. Now, I have my personal opinions in terms of parents trying to trans their child. I think that definitely inappropriate. But beyond that, ultimately, the parents deem how they see fit how to raise that child. That is not something that is like, oh my God, woe is me. I don't get to climb this corporate ladder. I don't get to do this. I don't get to go on vacations because I gotta stay home and watch the kid. I don't get to, like go to a pizza. It's like, so what? It's not like there isn't going to be, because you want to be able to live your little 20s and be like, a philanderer or whatever. But like, it's not like you can't have fun, period. But it also doesn't mean that you can't like do all those wonderful things later when a kid doesn't need to rely on you as heavily as the early years. That's what it's like. It's like to be pushed. Like, oh my God, you're gonna be barefoot and pregnant. That means you don't have any choices and whatever. Like choices to what? Like ride the penis carousel in Greece, and in a hostel somewhere with a bunch of like sweaty dudes that want to pass you around like a basketball. You can claim it's like, oh, it's not gonna be like that, but it usually is like that. Don't try to make it seem like this like just wonderful vacation and you're just gonna do something on your dime, which is probably not on your dime, and it's just gonna be fun, and all these little social media, because that's what it is. They jealous because you see other girls on their little social media platforms living like the high life, but you don't see all like the negative stuff, to get those little pictures. You don't see like the 45-year-old dude who's in the background that's not being taken pictures with her because she knows he probably had to do some sexual favors for that kind of guy because that's the sugar daddy, but not somebody she deemed like apt for a long-term partner. But she's getting resources and free vacation trips so she can post on Instagram like she's balling, like it's all on her money. Things of that sort. You don't see all that kind of stuff. And because of that, girls get jealous and, you know, they look at like that guy like, why don't we get to do this stuff? Oh my God, it's like, if we didn't have to raise this kid, I could have been doing the exact same stuff. It's that kind of mindset that we need to start teaching young girls that it is an honorable, respectable, and ultimately great thing that you meet a good guy early on, have a family, be married, and then raise your children. And then once you're out of those fertile years and then you can't have anymore, you can start worrying about all that other stuff. Like if you want to get into a particular career, then you can have it at your leisure at that point. I think that is a proper course of things. Children and family first, then worry about career. Because the career is always going to be there. There's no expiration date on a career. It'll always be there. There are 60, 70-year-olds still going to colleges and stuff to gain some kind of master's or something. You can always do it. But your womb has an expiration date. It is. The patriarchy didn't invent it. Biology did. Life did. God did.
Our burdens that we have to bear. We are responsible. And young men are being destroyed because young men, or men in general, know this. They have always been responsible for asserting this. They were always the authority that stood in the way of degeneracy, that made sure that the society existed and continued the way that it should in order to survive. Now the whole thing's been disrupted. And now it's being disrupted from the school level. Young boys. The UK government are specifically trying to get young boys. They're trying to manipulate them and choke out any sense of masculinity, confidence. Mothers out there watching this, are you okay? Would you be okay with this? Your precious boy, your happy little boy who giggles and smiles, whose nativities you go to, school plays, get his feet measured to get his new shoes, whose face lit up on Christmas morning. Is he a f***ing monster? Is he? Your innocent little boy?
So that's the thing. Most of these girls don't have any kind of empathy. Most. There's some. But they're the ones that be deemed pick-me's, male-centered. But no, they got sense and self-respect and respect of men to understand, like, some of these girls are whacked out of their freaking minds and bought into the feminist propaganda. But it isn't until that they see through the eyes of their own son or any male in their family they really respect and see any kind of struggle or heartache or some kind of accusation, something that is potentially bad towards those guys. It's not until then, especially if they got sons, it's not until then where they understand. It's not until it comes at their doorstep that they understand. Because, I shudder to those girl moms out there who won't care because it's not their problem. But they should care. They should at least care enough to make sure their young daughter learns respect of the male sex. Because that is ultimately what guys want. Respect is the functional equivalent to you girls loving compliments. You thrive off of compliments. Guys thrive off of respect. That needs to be like taught to young girls so they can have at least a good starting point. It's the same thing how we teach young boys, okay, don't hit girls. It's supposed to protect them, not harm them. That's a good thing to start off with. Not to pedestalize them or, kiss their ass. But make sure you don't do them harm. Girls need to learn, respect young boys. Learn how to talk to them, not at them. There's a way to talk with these men that you still hold self-respect, but you also respect them because that's what they like. Tommy likes it the way you talk to him like this.
Who's done nothing to anybody, who you would have thrown yourself in front of traffic to protect. You're going to let the government tell this precious little boy that he's a monster and that he's going to hurt people? You want to see his smile disappear? You want to see anxiety and guilt take over where happiness used to be? Not on my watch. Not on my watch. Thank you so much for watching. I do have some merch available. It is linked down below. Some high quality stuff.
Yeah. We need to avoid these kind of things. If you have children, it doesn't matter, boy or girl, make sure that they have both a mom and a dad. I don't care if they're not together, but it's still co-parenting in some kind of way. Or if one of them is, passed away or something like that, there is some kind of healthy masculine and feminine energy for that child to gain from, so they can have some kind of healthy outlook as they grow up. Do not leave it to the government. Do not leave it to these indoctrinating schools, because they don't ultimately care. They got their own little agenda. They got quotas. They just they see people as numbers. Ultimately, it's down to the parents. And the last thing you want is your boy being corrupted, thinking that he's just inherently evil when he hasn't done anything, and growing up with this mindset where it's only going to be a detriment to him in terms of trying to find a good woman who ultimately going to want a strong masculine man that she want to trust to raise any children. If he's like a weepy, anxiety-filled baby that's still living off the tea of the mom, he's going to have a hard time. And it doesn't help if these girls are raising with some mindsets, thinking all dudes are evil. Then one of these girls interact with your kid when he's out at a college party or something like that, and being blamed for something he did not do that your son isn't capable of, because you and the father raised him properly, unless the evidence bears out differently. But if but when it does, or even before then, you don't want that on your kid's head. You don't want potentially some girl to lob an accusation that is uncredited, tear down any kind of empire he's building for himself, ruining his reputation, possibly putting him in proper jail time over something that more often than not will be deemed false, and she's not held liable for ruining his livelihood. You should be concerned, and you should want to make sure that these girls are raised properly to respect men as much as boys are growing up to respect women. There's always one-sided. Girls are not raised to have any kind of respect towards men. There's always this negative outlook that is unhealthy for everybody involved. And boys shouldn't be raised just to kiss the ass of ladies. It's be respectful, but also have some self-respect for yourself too. Anyway, I'm curious to know what you guys think. I will see you guys for the next one. Take care.